Imagine standing in a local park at dusk.
Okay.
You're surrounded by hundreds, maybe even thousands,
Yeah.
of absolute strangers,
Wow, that's a lot of people.
right? And there's no script handed out at the entrance. There's been no rehearsal. The air is just incredibly thick with this heavy, unpredictable, raw human grief.
Yeah, that's an intense environment.
Extremely intense. And
Yes.
in that kind of setting, I mean, one screeching microphone or a sudden gust of wind or even just a poorly timed speech could completely shatter the vulnerability of the entire crowd.
It really could. It's so fragile.
It is. So how do you engineer a physical space to safely contain that much raw emotion? Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we are looking at something really profound, which is the hidden architecture of communal mourning.
It's just a fascinating logistical puzzle, honestly.
Yeah.
You are essentially attempting to build a rigid, reliable structure to hold something that is, by its very nature, entirely formless and chaotic.
Exactly. And our source material for this deep dive is a really comprehensive guide titled Organizing a Community Candlelight Vigil and Memorial Tribute.
Which is incredibly detailed.
It is. It includes specifics on resources like those from the funeral program site. And our mission today is to figure out how logistical precision, the kind of things we usually associate with corporate conferences or really tightly run weddings,
Right.
how that precision can actually transform a simple public gathering into a sacred shared space of remembrance. Okay, let's unpack this. Organizing a vigil feels a bit like directing a live theater performance, but the audience is also the cast.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, and there's absolutely no rehearsal, and everyone is experiencing very real, very heavy emotions in real time.
Taking that theater analogy a step further, think about the stage itself. You cannot facilitate a shared emotional release without first building a secure physical container to hold it.
A physical container.
Yes, because if the attendees are distracted by physical discomfort or, if they're confused about where they're supposed to stand or look, they simply cannot be emotionally present.
That makes a lot of sense.
The physical environment directly dictates the psychological experience.
And the source guide actually starts right there, with the physical layout of the space. Whether you are setting up in a local park, on church grounds, or in a wide-open public square, the very first directive is to establish a central focal point.
Right, like a stage.
Exactly. A raised stage, a clearly defined memorial table, or a designated speaking area. On the surface, that sounds like basic event planning 101.
Sure, it does.
But in the context of a grieving crowd, it serves a much deeper purpose, doesn't it?
It acts as an immediate spatial anchor. You have to remember, grief is inherently disorienting.
Yeah, it really is.
When people are in a state of shock or deep sorrow, their cognitive load is already maxed out. They are essentially in a mental fog.
So they need that direction.
Precisely. Providing a clear, undeniable physical focal point gives them immediate spatial orientation. By telling the brain, look over here, this is the center of gravity, you are subconsciously providing emotional grounding.
Wow. Which brings us to the defining element of the event, right? The candles.
The candle.
It is a candlelight vigil. That visual is so iconic. But the guide points out the sheer logistical nightmare of traditional open flame candles in a dense crowd.
It's a huge hazard.
Think about it. If you are standing shoulder to shoulder with strangers and the wind is whipping up, you aren't reflecting on the person or the tragedy you came to honor.
No, you're looking at the flame.
You are intensely focused on making sure you don't accidentally set your neighbor's jacket on fire with dripping wax.
What's fascinating here is how the guide addresses that exact tension between historical tradition and modern practicality.
Yeah.
It strongly suggests battery-operated candles as a perfectly valid and honestly often superior alternative.
Which some people might think is less authentic, right?
Maybe, but they preserve that crucial symbolic glow of remembrance and unity, which is the entire point of the visual anyway.
Right.
But they completely eliminate the physical anxiety of managing an open flame.
It frees up the mental bandwidth of the attendees.
Hmm.
You can actually close your eyes and just be in the moment without worrying about the breeze. And speaking of the environment shaping the mood, the guide emphasizes lighting and sound in a way that feels, incredibly cinematic.
It really does.
It details how the visual transition of dusk falling naturally mirrors the emotional journey of the ceremony. You gather in the lingering daylight, you move collectively into the darkness, and then the space is illuminated by this artificial shared glow.
It is deeply symbolic. It taps into very primal human associations with light and dark.
Yeah.
However, from a strict logistical standpoint, an organizer also has to ensure basic safety.
Of course.
The guide recommends soft ambient lighting. Think lanterns lining a pathway or warm string lights draped overhead.
So not pitch black, but not bright either.
Right. You need to provide enough visibility so people feel physically secure navigating the space without ruining that solemn, reflective atmosphere with the harsh glare of security floodlights.
The audio logistics might be even more critical.
Yeah.
The text makes a massive point about the absolute necessity of testing audio equipment thoroughly in advance.
Oh, this is so important.
We have all been to events where a microphone suddenly screeches with feedback.
Ugh, the worst.
At a regular conference, it's annoying. But at a vigil, during a moment of profound silence or a tearful eulogy, that sudden spike in noise triggers a literal fight-or-flight response.
It induces a cortisol spike in a crowd that is already deeply vulnerable.
Yeah.
A jarring environmental disruption pulls someone completely out of their internal state of reflection and forces them back into a state of high alert.
That's horrible.
It is. The logistics have to be utterly flawless, specifically so they become invisible to the crowd.
But playing devil's advocate for a second,
Okay.
if I'm a planner orchestrating everything down to the ambient string lights and the exact decibel level of the microphone, how do I ensure the event doesn't feel manufactured?
That's a very fair point.
Because we think of vigils as these spontaneous grassroots outpourings of community love. If it requires the precision of a military operation, doesn't it risk feeling too sterile or corporate to the people grieving?
Well, the friction only happens when the logistics draw attention to themselves.
Interesting.
When the scaffolding is built correctly, it is entirely in service of the emotion rather than in service of a rigid corporate feeling schedule. The precision is there purely to protect the attendee's vulnerability.
So it's a protective measure.
Exactly. When the audio is clear, when the lighting is safe but soft, the event feels completely natural. It feels spontaneous. People only notice the manufactured nature of an event when those logistics fail and pull them out of the moment.
That reframes it perfectly. You are essentially building an invisible safe room.
Yes.
So once that physical container is built and secured, you have to guide attendees through the internal, heavy, emotional landscape. Here's where it gets really interesting.
I know where you're going with this.
The text points to personalized memorial tribute programs as the central anchor of the ceremony.
Tangible keepsakes. This is a vital and often overlooked component of communal mourning.
I have to admit, when I first read that, I was skeptical.
Really?
Yeah. Think about the smartphone in your pocket right now. We live in a totally digital world where we scan QR codes for restaurant menus and board airplanes with our screens.
Right. Everything is digital.
Why couldn't an organizer just project a memorial image on a screen? Or have attendees pull up a PDF program on their phones? Why does holding a physical piece of paper matter so much at a vigil?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look closely at the psychology of tactile grounding.
Tactile grounding.
Yes, grief is an abstract, heavy, and often overwhelming cognitive state. It lives in the mind and the heart, and it can make you feel completely detached from your physical body.
Like you're just floating.
Exactly. Giving someone a physical, coordinated piece of stationery, whether that is a detailed program, a prayer card, or a sturdy bookmark, gives that abstract grief a physical manifestation.
It's quite literally something to grip onto when you feel like you're emotionally falling apart.
Precisely. The texture of the paper physically grounds you in the present moment.
And I guess looking at a smartphone introduces entirely the wrong psychological context, too.
Oh, absolutely. Your phone is a device associated with work emails, social media notifications, daily stress.
Yeah, you don't want a text from your boss popping up during a eulogy.
Right. A printed program is a dedicated artifact. And the source highlights the role of specialized providers, like the funeral program site in this process, specifically because they provide customizable templates that ensure consistent formatting.
Which is key. Because I imagine if a community is honoring multiple victims, say, after a collective local tragedy and everyone just printed out their own distinct flyers from their home computers,
It would be visually chaotic.
the memorial tables would look like a community bulletin board. That visual clutter would just add to the ambient stress of the event.
Visual unity is about equity and dignity.
Dignity, I like that.
When you use consistent formatting across the board, it ensures that every single individual being remembered is represented with equal care.
Just so no one feels left out or lesser.
Exactly. No one's tribute looks hastily put together or like an afterthought. When you combine high-resolution portraits, carefully selected quotes or scriptures, and uniform typography, it creates a unified presentation of profound respect.
The guide also emphasizes that these printed materials must include a clear, easy-to-read order of service,
Yes, the schedule.
which links right back to what we were discussing earlier about the mental fog of grief. If you are standing in a park crying, your working memory is severely compromised.
You're not tracking time.
No.
Yeah.
So it is deeply soothing to be able to look down at a piece of paper in your hands and know, okay, next is a song, then a reading, and then we light the candles. It acts as a cognitive roadmap through the pain, removing the anxiety of the unknown.
It also extends the impact of the vigil far beyond the physical boundaries of the park or the churchyard.
How so?
Well, the text explicitly notes that these small tokens and programs are designed to be taken home.
Oh!
Long after the event concludes, they become permanent physical artifacts of the community's solidarity. They end up resting on a mantle or tucked into a favorite book.
That's beautiful. So we have the physical space secured with invisible logistics, and we have these tactile anchors firmly in people's hands. Next, the guide explores how you synchronize this massive disparate crowd and time.
Right.
It details the actual choreography of the ceremony.
Synchronization is arguably the most powerful psychological tool an organizer possesses in these moments.
The guide paints a really vivid picture of the synchronized candle lighting moment. It stresses the importance of having all attendees illuminate their candles simultaneously, rather than just randomly lighting them as they wander into the venue.
Yes, it is a specific, highly coordinated cue.
Why is that so important?
Consider the psychological impact of that specific action. If you've ever been to a vigil, you know that intense feeling of isolation in the dark.
Yeah, you feel like you're the only one hurting.
Exactly. You are surrounded by people, but you feel entirely alone in your sorrow. And then, at the exact same coordinated moment, hundreds of small lights flare up in your peripheral vision.
Wow.
It provides immediate, undeniable visual proof that you are not alone in the darkness. It breaks the illusion of isolation that grief relies on.
And to accompany that visual moment, the text suggests specific auditory cues too. Gentle instrumental music, a single reading, or a profound period of collective silence.
Silence is crucial.
This brings up the curation of the speakers, which the guide treats very seriously. Planners are advised to interweave brief readings, personal reflections, and shared memories.
Yes.
But the guide heavily stresses the necessity of keeping these speaking segments concise. Organizers are told to provide speakers with strict, non-negotiable guidance on timing and tone.
To a layman, that might sound almost callous.
Yeah, I bet.
Telling a grieving mother or heartbroken community leader you only have exactly 2 minutes to speak your piece feels counterintuitive to the idea of an emotional outpouring.
So what does this all mean? To me, it sounds exactly like composing a symphony.
Okay, I like that.
In a complex piece of orchestral music, the loud, booming notes are important. But the moments of silence, the measured rests between the notes, are actually what give the music its shape and emotional resonance.
That's a beautiful analogy.
Without the rests, it is just an exhausting wall of noise. If speakers are allowed to go on too long, or if the tone becomes too chaotic and rambling, you lose the rests. You lose that crucial, quiet space for the audience to process their own feelings in response to what was just said.
This raises an important question, though.
That's that.
How do organizers actively allow space for multiple diverse voices and deep emotion without making the ceremony feel like a marathon that leaves the crowd completely emotionally fatigued?
Yeah, that sounds like an incredibly delicate pacing challenge.
It is. The guide suggests that this balance is achieved through careful variety and sequencing.
I'm mixing it up.
Exactly. You don't stack 5 heavy, tearful eulogies back to back.
That would just be overwhelming.
You interweave a short, poignant personal memory, followed immediately by a dedicated moment of silence, followed perhaps by a soothing piece of instrumental music. It purposefully breaks up the emotional intensity.
You are basically acting as a thermostat, regulating the emotional temperature of the crowd.
That's it, exactly.
You gently guide them to a peak of shared, intense sorrow, and then you immediately offer a pressure release valve through music or guided silence, allowing them to catch their breath before moving forward.
Right.
But a beautifully choreographed symphony, complete with perfect lighting and perfectly timed rests, only matters if everyone in the community can actually access it and feel safe experiencing it.
Yes, accessibility is paramount.
Which brings us to a major theme that runs throughout the source text: designing the event for the entirely whole community.
True inclusivity goes far beyond just putting out an open invitation. It requires anticipating highly varied needs.
The guide emphasizes community involvement from day one of the planning process. Organizers are urged to invite local groups, various faith leaders, and prominent community members to the planning table to create a sense of shared ownership.
That's so important.
It ensures that the vigil doesn't feel like one specific organization dictating to the neighborhood exactly how they are supposed to mourn.
Shared ownership on the logistical back end translates to a feeling of genuine communal embrace on the front end.
Right.
It reinforces the idea that the vigil is a collective knitting together of a fractured community fabric.
And then we get to accessibility. Yes, the location needs to be physically accessible.
Of course.
Planners need to ensure there are ramps, that there is adequate seating for those who physically cannot stand for a 40-minute ceremony, and that the printed materials we discussed use legible fonts for older attendees.
The basics.
The basics, right. But there is a specific detail in the text that completely shifted my perspective. We usually think of accessibility strictly in terms of physical mobility.
Right.
But the source explicitly highlights the need for emotional accessibility.
Yes. Designing quiet spaces for retreat and ensuring support resources are quietly available on the periphery.
Exactly. And this made me wonder, how does that actually work in practice? If you were in a wide-open park, how do you design a public space to accommodate something as unpredictable as human grief?
You achieve emotional accessibility by actively rejecting the myth that there is a single correct way to grieve.
Oh, that's profound.
People process trauma at entirely different speeds and in entirely different ways.
So if someone is feeling the need to weep openly near the stage, they're supported in doing so.
Yes.
But if a different attendee suddenly feels overwhelmed by the crowd, the noise, or just the swelling emotion and feels a panic attack coming on, there is a designated, slightly removed, quiet space.
Right?
They can step back into the shadows, sit on a provided bench, and just breathe without feeling like they're fleeing the event or interrupting the solemnity of the main ceremony.
By setting up those peripheral quiet zones, organizers are communicating a profound message. However you are feeling right now, and however you need to process this moment, is acceptable.
There is a space built specifically for you here.
Exactly. You are allowing deeply communal participation and private individual retreat to occur simultaneously within the exact same event footprint.
It really requires organizers to possess an immense amount of empathy, anticipating the varied psychological breaking points of hundreds of strangers.
It absolutely does.
Which circles right back to your earlier point. The logistical framework is what creates the boundaries that make that emotional safety possible in the first place.
Eventually, though, the shared experience must conclude.
Right.
The organizers have brought the community together, guided them into a deeply vulnerable state, and now they must safely transition them out of that state and back into the reality of their everyday lives.
The closing of the vigil, the text treats this as a crucial bridge. You can't just abruptly cut the microphone and tell everyone to drive home.
No, that would be jarring.
The goal of the closing moments is to leave attendees with a lingering sense of connection and, ideally, a degree of peace. The guide suggests culminating with a final reading, a collective prayer, or, most effectively, a shared physical gesture.
That shared physical gesture, like raising all the illuminated candles together into the air one last time, or having attendees walk forward in a line to place their candles around a central memorial site.
Yeah.
It acts as a physical period at the end of a very complex emotional sentence.
It transitions the gathering from collective outward remembrance back to internal individual reflection.
Right.
By placing the candle down or by blowing it out together, you are symbolically returning the heavy burden of grief from the broad shoulders of the community back to the individual. But the hope is that because of the shared experience, the burden is just a little bit lighter now.
The guide summarizes this ultimate goal beautifully. It is about utilizing meticulous logistics, thoughtful environmental design, and deep emotional care, supported by tangible anchors, from resources like the funeral program site to turn a fleeting public gathering into a sacred, lasting expression of human love.
It really changes how you look at public events.
It does.
For you listening to this, even if you are never in your life tasked with organizing a vigil, understanding how to engineer a space that honors complex human emotion is just a masterclass in empathy.
100%.
You learn how to anticipate another person's pain, how to respect their cognitive limits when they are hurting, and how to design a soft, supportive place for that pain to land.
It is the absolute highest form of hospitality.
Oh, yeah.
You are welcoming people in their darkest, most disoriented moments and utilizing every tool at your disposal to ensure they feel seen, safe, and supported.
We started this deep dive by comparing the planning process to directing a live theater performance, where organizers have to build a secure stage for raw, unpredictable emotion. But when the cast eventually leaves the stage and the audience goes back to their homes, something unseen lingers in the air.
Which leaves us with a compelling final thought to consider.
I'd love to hear it.
If organizing a vigil successfully manages to transform an ordinary, bustling public square or a mundane local park into a sacred space of collective emotion,
Yeah.
how does that invisible emotional imprint alter the way the community interacts with that everyday physical location long after the crowds have dispersed and the candles are blown out? Does the space itself remember the vigil, even when it returns to just being a park again?
A heavy but beautiful question to carry with you. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us.